Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the And Also podcast. I'm your host, Madison, and today we have a solo episode. I've only done technically, I guess, two of these. The first was the initial launch episode, and then I did an episode about ADHD and some of my frustrations and challenges with being neurodivergent, and now we're back for yet another one. And I wanted this solo episode to be something very personal and something that I could not access or could not dive into with another person. As I thought about that, I figured, well, this has to be catered towards my experience with grief and death, and I wanted to talk about the things that got me through. And this has been a question that's come up time and time again with some of my guests, like, what is the thing that keeps you going when you're facing the darkest time you've ever experienced, and when you're in the worst place you've ever been? And how do you convince yourself that it's worth going, that it's worth continuing? And so today's episode is going to be different. I'm going to be sharing with you a bunch of things that helped me in those very early days that feel very hazy and very blurry. And how did I really get myself out of bed? How did I keep myself alive during that time? And then I'm also going to touch on the things that helped me a year and some change later, the things that I still apply to this day, how things have changed, how my coping mechanisms have changed, and all sorts of things like that. So that will be today's episode. But of course, before we get started, let's talk about the drink of the day. Today's drink, I have been kind of obsessed with this. The reason I discovered it is because I do social media for this brand. I'd never heard of it before working with them. And what I mean by that is I am their videographer for their social media content. So I, of course, have had to try the drink, and I wound up actually really liking some of the flavors. So this is the brand Wonder Beet, and this is the beet and berry flavor. And if you like beet juice or like wellness juices, this is for you. So the ingredients are very simple. It's beet juice, apple juice, strawberry juice, raspberry juice, and bilberry juice. It's literally like juice, like you juiced some things, and this is what you got. Doing video work for them has kind of made me a little bit of a loyal consumer of the product. I've been making smoothies with this juice at home. I've been making mocktails with this juice, and I really like it. And it sounds sponsored. I promise this is not. I wish it was sponsored. That would be amazing, but it's just something I really enjoy, and I love a cold pressed juice. So let's get into it, shall we? It's so good. The best way I found to drink this is I make a smoothie with it. I do frozen cherries, frozen blueberries, banana, and this juice, and then like a handful of spinach. Literally 10 out of 10. So good. So that's our drink of the day. If you've tried Wonder Beet, let me know which flavor is your favorite. If you haven't, let me know what you're drinking today and what you're drinking as you watch along this episode. And next we have our book of the week. This one is very near and dear to my heart. I read this at the time of Regis's passing, and it motivated me to do something with my life other than rot, because that's all I wanted to do. That's all that my brain was telling me I could do. This book is called The Top 5 Regrets of Dying. It's by Bronnie, Ware, A Life Transformed by the Dearly Departing. And this is literally the top 5 regrets of people who are dying. It's very straightforward. I will tell you the regrets, but you'll have to read more to find out the why. Regret 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Regret 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And regret 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. There's not much to say other than we can all learn something from these things. And these are all things we know, but because we have this sense that our life isn't finite and that, this is just going to go on forever, until you've had such a near and dear experience with death, it's very hard to really actualize these things as reality. And you got to get a little existential dread to put yourself in the shoes of the fact that your life is not forever. There is no eternal existence in this world. Who knows what happens beyond this? Nobody knows, okay? But I do know that while I'm here, if I'm lucky enough to have a deathbed experience where I'm, at the end of my life thinking of all the things, which, most people are not lucky enough to even have that. But if I am lucky enough, I don't want to be looking back and wishing that I had done things differently. I don't want to wish I lived a fuller life. I don't want to wish I had not done or done certain things, because I just want to be content with the choices that I make and the person that I wound up being at the end. And I think that is the most important thing that any of us can do to make our lives meaningful. So I think that book is fantastic. I think the memoir style and the mini chapters within the chapters are super helpful. And if you're looking to find reason and purpose in your life that is not so arbitrary, such as religion or as an afterlife or as all of those things that tend to be recommended when you're facing existentialism, I think it's finding the meaning in the small things now and preventing that regret in the future. So I hope you read it. I hope you like it. And let me know what you're currently reading, if you're reading anything. I gotta pull up my notes for this one. So I want to start with the things that helped me early on in my grieving process. So Regis died in November of 2022, November 6th. I didn't find out till November 7th. And once I found out, it was very much a fight or flight for the first few hours of knowing. I knew I had to get things in order. I knew I had to make sure that my life was not going to crumble, but it was slowly creeping in. The reality was slowly creeping in, and I had to fight that off for a little bit to get my shit together, which meant emailing all my professors in my college and figuring out, I need time off. Do I need time off? How am I going to manage this? What do I do? It was setting up therapy appointments. It was calling my family and telling them the news. It was a lot of things all at once. And I think my ability to set myself up in that moment, to make sure I didn't fail school, to make sure I didn't lose my job, to make sure everything was okay, it was just a product of being in shock and like prolonging that impact of the reality of the situation. So I found out that, this person I had dated for 6 years of my life, this person I grew up with, this person who's my best friend, who had a very intense struggle with schizophrenia towards the end, who I felt disconnected from, who, there was a point in time where I thought I was going to spend my life with Regis. It was always Regis and Madison. And then that was like completely severed in a moment. And it makes you feel sick just thinking about it. That moment when you find out that somebody you love is dead. Like, it's horrible. Those early days were really, really difficult, and putting myself back there to even compile this list was difficult. At the time, I was living in New York City, and I did not feel at all really supported by the person I was living with at the time. I feel like he wanted me to get better and, be cured of the grief, and that is not something that's possible, as a lot of us know. He had never been through something like this, and he had no idea how to deal with it. And that's fair. In fact, I'm quite jealous of the fact that he didn't know how to deal with it, because I wish I didn't know how to deal with it, because Regis would still be here. So I felt very alone. Even the person I was living with was very just like, okay, can we wrap this up? So I was kind of left to my own devices to figuring it out. I called my therapist. Even therapy itself was not helpful for me at the time. It felt like the worst thing, actually. Therapy was not helpful. So let's start on the things that helped me in those early days. And the first one is letting other people take the reins. That was very hard for me, because I am a huge control freak and I love to be in control of my reality and my life. But grief is one of those things that wakes you up very quickly and teaches you that you are in control of nothing. And so when I felt the most out of control, it was actually the easiest time for me to step back and let other people in, and, let other people take care of me, let other people cook for me, let other people tell me, this is what we're doing today, Madison. We're going to get coffee and you're coming with me. Because if it wasn't for those things and those people, I would not have left the house. I would have not taken a shower. I would have not brushed my teeth. I would have not, done any of the things that I needed to do to be alive. And so I think it's one of those things where I had to just let other people Like, I had to trust that other people had my best interest and let them take the reins of things. The next thing is that I had to stop being so hard on myself about my productivity levels. And I had to learn that just surviving each day was more than enough. And that was a very hard thing for me. And I feel like now that I've learned that I put this intense value on my productivity my entire youth and into my young adulthood. And then, Regis died and I was faced with this like inability to do quite literally anything. I couldn't work, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do much. And it was in the middle of the semester. So that on top of everything else was so difficult. And so I had to take a step back and say, it's okay if all you can do today is, move from the bed to the couch. And I think there's a level of like letting yourself bed rot to like trying to get yourself out and about. So I think all of these things I'm sharing with you kind of work in tandem with each other, such as like I let other people take the reins when others noticed I was not leaving the house and letting myself be in that dark place. That's when they would step in and help me and support me and love me. And that's what I needed. And then just like not beating myself up. If I couldn't do XYZ, then I couldn't do XYZ because I just lost the person I loved. That's okay to take a break. I know with grief, some people do quite the opposite. They throw themselves into work as like as an avoidance tactic, quite frankly. And for me, I physically couldn't do it. Even if I wanted to live my life that way, I could not do that. So I had to take a step back and just let myself not be productive. Next is I try to leave the house every day or every few days, just even if I just stood outside for a few minutes, even if I went on the balcony and stood out there, like whatever I could do, I needed to do. Even if I walked outside, walked a block, walked back, and came back inside. I just needed to move my body in some sort of way because it's very easy when you're laying in your bed to just get stuck and feel that sinking, horrible, trapped feeling. So that was something that was really important for me. Next was that I slept as much as I needed because sleep was very few and far between for me. I struggled to sleep. I feared sleeping. Every time I would lay in bed, my brain would go to the dark place of what those last moments of Regis's life were like. And I couldn't run from it. So I would avoid sleeping as much as possible. But when sleep came, I slept like no one's business. I would sleep for, 15 hours straight if I had to. Next is coffee. Coffee, I think I give so much credit to coffee because coffee was the thing that got me out of my bed every single day. Making my coffee in the morning was the vessel to the rest of the day. If I did not have coffee, if I did not have that reason, it doesn't have to be coffee. It can be anything. It could be feeding your dog. You know what I mean? If I didn't have that one thing to get me from the bed to the world, I wouldn't do it. So coffee, making coffee, consuming coffee, it like truly was a lifeline for me. And it sounds dramatic, but if you've been there, it's the smallest thing that can save your life. Next, at the time, I did a lot of stuff that helped me feel more connected to Regis. And so I started painting. I started journaling and writing to him. I started consuming art in a different way because he was a super talented artist and really a genius artist, if you ask me. And so feeling connected with art made me feel connected with him. Also listening to like his playlists and his favorite music. And he sent me a few playlists before he died. And I think I memorized every word of those songs. So that was really helpful. Okay, so the next thing I did was that if I had a day that didn't feel as heavy, because like some days I literally couldn't move. Like I couldn't breathe, I couldn't walk. I felt like I was crying. It was dark. It went so dark some days. But there were some days that if they didn't feel as heavy and as intense and as somber as most of the days did, I would take advantage of that as quickly as I could, and I would do anything possible for myself, whether it was wash my hair. I had like a major fear of getting in the shower. So if I had a day that didn't feel as heavy, I would get in the shower, do an everything shower. There were some times where I didn't shower for like 2 to 3 weeks. Like, it was really bad. I would go buy a new book. I would take a walk to Strand and Union Square, and I would get a new book. I would go to the park and just people watch. I would hang out with friends, go grab a drink. Whatever I could do in that day, I would do it. And I think it's really important to be able to recognize these are my heavy days, and these days I feel like I can do something, so that's when I'm going to do my grocery shopping. That's when I'm going to do, things with my friends. That's when I'm going to do some self-care, because it's hard to do that stuff any other time. And then the last thing I could think of for like in those early days and like first few months of him passing, I put a lot of photos of us around my apartment, by my desk. I framed and hung a lot of photos, and I did that in efforts to keep him present, to keep him there in some way. And that's what I came up with. So I printed out every photo. It was like, a stack of photos, and I would just put them everywhere. I would put them in my notebooks. I would put photos on the dash of my car. I put photos everywhere, and that was super helpful, just as a reminder that I wasn't forgetting about him, because I had this fear that he would think I didn't care. He would think I forgot about him, or I was happy about it. And I just wanted him to know, if that's even a thing that exists out there, that he was present in my life no matter what, and he still is. I have his art hung up all over my apartment. I keep him present as much as I possibly can, and I knew that from the start, that was something I needed to be dedicated to doing. Okay, so now we're on to things that help me now in the present day. It's been a year and a few months, and actually his birthday is coming up on March 8th, so I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not very deep into this process. I have so much raw pain, so much that's unaddressed, so much that I struggle with Regis's death. But I've been able to navigate the grief over time and figure out things that keep me connected with him, keep me from falling into that very dark place, keep me from losing my progress in the grief, because I hate to think of the idea that there's an end goal with grief, because I don't think there is. That it just is what it is, and it grows with you, and it changes with you, and it's a weird thing. But there are a lot of aspects of it that I feel like I've, unfortunately, for better or for worse, have grown from. And of course, I would change all of that in a second if Regis was still alive. I don't want to learn these things, but I have learned them. So it's one of those strange silver linings that you don't really want, but you have it. And one of those things that I learned was, once again, honoring him, talking about him whenever I possibly can. I don't want to pretend like he never existed. A lot of people do that when it comes to death. They take the pictures down, they put away the things, they donate all their stuff, and that's just not how it works for me. If it works like that for you, I'm not going to tell you that's wrong. But for me, I think keeping him present is the only thing I can do. I celebrate his birthday every year. We're going to get drinks this year with some friends and celebrate him on his birthday. And with that comes like advocating for suicide prevention and for more research on schizophrenia, more resources, more help, that kind of thing. And bringing awareness is so important to me. Next, I think in the initial stages of grief, I lost connection with myself. I completely feel like that version of me died. And so everything I enjoyed and did died too. So now I'm at a time in this experience where I can reconnect with those things, reconnect with old hobbies, interests that I lost in those initial stages of grief. So I'd be like working out. I go to the gym every day. I love it. It's been the greatest thing for my mental health, but I couldn't do that in the early days. I couldn't even get out of bed and walk to the living room sometimes, So moving my body, making videos again, starting the podcast, fashion. I've gotten back into fashion after a lot of time, going out with friends and enjoying my life, trying new things, like all of that stuff was lost for a very long time, and now it's slowly healing to bring those things back. Next is that I still allow myself to have really awful, horrible days when I have to. And that's just part of the experience. Sometimes you have to bed rot, but it's a lot more few and far between because I'm doing so much more to support myself in all the other moments, in all the other areas. And I think that's really important. I still write to him a lot. I have my Regis journal. I keep this journal, and if I'm having any sort of feelings, any sort of fears, any hesitations, any kind words, any love that I need to give to him, I write it all in that journal. And that's been something I've been keeping from the start, but continuing with that is always helpful. I don't use it as often as I used to, and there's also some guilt around that, but I have to just respect that I know what's right and what feels right and what is needed and what is worth feeling guilty about and what is not worth feeling guilty about, because there are things that I feel like guilt makes more sense for, but this is not one of those things, and I don't need to feel guilty. But girl, we all know it's a struggle. I still let him be a part of every room I'm in. I'm never not going to say his name. If it comes up and I want to talk about him, I'm not going to stop that. A lot of people get really awkward and uncomfortable when Regis comes up in conversation because they don't know how I'm going to act. They don't know if I'm going to break down and start crying. And it is a mixed bag. And if I do break down, that should be okay too. But it's always awkward bringing him up, but I still do. It's hard. It can be weird for people. He is worth bringing up. He is worth sharing, and I want people who didn't know him to know him, and that's super important to me. So, sorry, your girl's gonna keep doing it. Next is I tried to live my life more in the way that Regis did, which was compassionate, empathetic, but also he did not give a what anyone thought about him. He did whatever he wanted, of course, like within reason, and he just did what he wanted to do. If he wanted to try something new, he tried it shamelessly. If he failed, okay, who cares? Let's give it another go. He was such a bold personality, and I just strive to be like that every day, and that helps me feel connected to him and helps me feel better in my grief. With that, there are a lot of people going through a lot of hard things. Meeting others with empathy and openness is just really important in my healing journey and my ability to grieve in a way that feels like it's doing good by other people. So I try to help other people who are in his shoes, and that could mean helping people that are struggling with mental illness, helping people who are struggling with really big things that are really hard. The next thing that's been helpful for me is surrounding myself with other grieving people and opening the conversation of grief as much as I can with those people, the people who understand. You can tend to sense it too. And it's a really big reason why I started this podcast, was selfishly to connect with other grieving people, but also to get the message out there and share that grieving is not weird. It's so normal, and we should be able to grieve loudly, and we shouldn't be so shrunk down into a box when we've lost somebody. We should be able to share the experience, not feel ashamed of our pain, and be met with a lot more openness. And I wish that there was more awareness around grief and being aware of grief, even if you haven't experienced it. It's just so important to the mental health of everybody, because we're all going to experience it. We're all going to live it. I guess not really live it because we'll be dead, but we're all going to know somebody who dies, and we're all going to die. So grief needs to be the most normalized thing, I think, because it's so normal. Like we're all going to deal with it. So I don't know why we're so hush hush about it. And other cultures are not like that, and I think we should really take note of that. But yeah, talking to other grieving people, learning from them, sitting with them, hearing their stories, that was hard for me at first, but now it's so much easier. Okay, I feel like that was a lot. I feel like we covered so many things, but I think also a really big thing that helped me was my cat, Gio. Like, he gives me so much happiness and purpose, and he's so innocent and kind and loving, and he's the most harmless thing in the entire world, and I just love him so much. He gives me so much reason to keep going every day. Surrounding myself with good people and just trying to be present. I mean, grief sucks, but grief is love, and how do we make that grief into something worthwhile? It's inevitable, it's painful, it sucks, but here we are, right? And so we have to deal with it. When it comes to grief, there are so many things that are helpful for some people, so many things that are not helpful for some people. So it's a lot of just listening to yourself, giving yourself what you need, giving yourself the space and the empathy, and letting other people in to your world. So those are the things that really helped me. If you're a grieving person, I would love to know if any of this resonated with you, or if there's anything you've learned in the process that you would like to share, because I'm sure it will be helpful to anyone watching. If you're watching on YouTube, definitely leave that in the comments. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, leave a review of the show. You can also put some notes in there. I would love to read your thoughts. You could follow the podcast on Instagram too. Send me a DM. I would love to talk to you about this if you have any ideas, thoughts, or suggestions. And yeah, I hope this was helpful for you guys. I kind of want to do more episodes like this, where it's like a sit down kind of conversation about something. So let me know what you thought of this episode. Be sure to follow the show everywhere on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Instagram. And I look forward to seeing you guys in next week's episode. Thanks again for watching or listening, and I will see you very soon.